Captain Lee Hyun-woo walked through the long metal halls of Coalition Station Nexus Prime and watched the daily work happen around him like it had for the past 3 years since humans joined the galactic community. The station was huge beyond anything Earth had ever built, with rooms that could hold entire cities and corridors that stretched for miles in every direction. But what caught his attention was not the size or the amazing alien technology, but the simple fact that humans were everywhere doing the work that kept this massive place running. He stopped at a maintenance panel where Park So-young was working on the quantum reactor systems that powered half the station, and watched her small hands move with practiced skill through the complex wiring that even the advanced Vorthak engineers avoided touching because it required too much patience and attention to detail. So-young looked up at him with tired eyes and wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her work glove and said the main power coupling was acting up again and needed the kind of careful adjustment that only human hands could manage because the alien workers either used too much force or gave up when the work got tedious. Hyun-woo nodded and continued his walk through the station, and everywhere he looked, he saw more humans doing the jobs that kept the coalition running smoothly, but getting no recognition for their vital work. In the communications center, Kim Jae-min supervised a team of human technicians who maintained the hyperspace networks that connected thousands of worlds across the galaxy, and without their constant work, the entire coalition would lose contact with its far colonies within days. The ethereal Keth Mori, who claimed to be the greatest scientist in the galaxy, never bothered to learn how the communication systems actually worked, because they considered maintenance work beneath their advanced minds, and preferred to spend their time on theoretical research that rarely helped anyone. Hyun-woo passed through the administrative sector where hundreds of humans processed supply requests and coordinated shipments of food and medicine to colony worlds and managed waste disposal systems and handled the 1,000 small tasks that kept billions of beings alive and healthy. The crystalline Nexari, who controlled most of the Coalition's trade empire, never thanked the human workers who made their profits possible, and instead treated them like living tools that existed only to serve their business interests. Ambassador Choi Mi-ran had tried many times to get better treatment for human workers, but the Coalition Council always dismissed her requests with polite words that meant nothing, and promised changes that never came. The alien leaders saw humans as a primitive species that had been lucky to discover faster than light travel and join the galactic community. But they failed to understand that humans brought something special to the Coalition that no other species possessed. While the Vorthak were excellent warriors with their thick armor and powerful weapons, they could not handle delicate work that required patience and the ability to think around problems instead of just following orders. The Keth Mori had incredible scientific knowledge and could understand complex theories that humans could barely comprehend, but they lacked the practical skills needed to fix things when they broke down or make systems work in the real world where nothing ever went according to plan. The Nexari were brilliant at managing trade and making deals that benefited their crystal cities, but they had no interest in the dirty work of actually moving goods from one place to another or maintaining the equipment that made trade possible. Humans filled the gap between alien theory and alien practice by doing the work that required both intelligence and willingness to get their hands dirty and solve problems that did not have easy answers. Hyun-woo stopped at a viewing port that looked out into space where dozens of ships arrived and departed every hour carrying cargo and passengers between the stars. And he knew that human pilots guided many of those ships because they had the reflexes and judgment needed to navigate through asteroid fields and solar storms that would challenge even the most advanced autopilot systems. He also knew that human mechanics kept those ships flying by doing the careful maintenance work that prevented engine failures and life support breakdowns that could kill everyone aboard. But the alien passengers never thought about who made their safe journey possible. The Coalition had grown wealthy and powerful over thousands of years by bringing together the best qualities of many different species, but they had made the mistake of thinking that military strength and scientific knowledge were the only things that mattered. They forgot that someone had to do the actual work of building and maintaining and repairing the civilization they were so proud of, and humans had quietly become the ones who did that work better than anyone else. Hyun-woo walked past a group of Vorthak officers who were discussing battle strategies and planning military exercises, but he noticed that none of them knew how to repair their own weapons or maintain their own armor, because they had human technicians who handled those details for them. He saw Keth Mori scientists working on equations that could unlock the secrets of the universe, but their laboratories only functioned because human assistants kept the equipment calibrated and the experiments running smoothly day after day. The Nexari merchants made fortunes by trading rare minerals and exotic goods across the galaxy, but their warehouses and transport systems depended on human workers who tracked inventory and prevented the theft and waste that could destroy any business. None of the alien species seemed to realize how much they had come to depend on human workers, or what would happen if those workers disappeared. So Young had told him that the quantum reactors needed daily adjustments that the instruction manuals never mentioned, because every reactor was slightly different and required an experienced engineer who could feel when something was wrong and make the tiny changes that kept the power flowing smoothly. Jamin had explained that the hyperspace communication networks failed constantly in ways that no computer could predict or fix, because space was full of radiation and gravity waves and other forces that interfered with signals, and only human operators had the intuition needed to keep the messages flowing between worlds. The human administrators knew which supply convoys were always late, and which medical shipments needed extra protection, and which waste disposal systems were on the edge of breakdown, because they paid attention to patterns that alien supervisors ignored. All of this knowledge and skill and dedication was invisible to the coalition leadership, who saw only that humans worked in support roles and assumed that meant human work was not important. Hyun-woo reached his office and sat down at his desk to review the daily reports that showed how many systems had been repaired and how many problems had been solved and how many disasters had been prevented by human workers who would never receive any recognition for their efforts. He thought about the conversation he had heard earlier between two Vorthak commanders who were complaining that humans took up too much space on coalition stations and used too many resources considering their limited contribution to galactic society. The irony was painful because those same commanders depended on human technicians to maintain their weapons and human pilots to transport their troops and human engineers to keep their bases powered and operational. Ambassador Miran had warned him that sentiment against humans was growing stronger among some coalition members who viewed Earth as a burden rather than a partner and wanted to reduce human involvement in coalition affairs. They talked about efficiency and cost reduction and the benefits of replacing human workers with automated systems that would not require food or housing or medical care. But Hyun-woo knew what they did not understand, which was that humans brought more than just labor to the coalition, and that the day humans left would be the day the coalition began to fall apart. He looked out his window at the busy station around him and wondered how long it would take the aliens to realize their mistake after the humans were gone. The announcement came on a Tuesday morning when High Counselor Zethra of the Vorthak stood before the Coalition Council and declared that the time had come to implement the efficiency directive that would modernize coalition operations by replacing outdated human workers with advanced automated systems. Hyun-woo watched the broadcast from his office and felt his stomach drop as Zethra explained that humans had served their purpose in helping the coalition transition to new technologies, but their limited cognitive capabilities made them unsuitable for the complex demands of modern galactic civilization. The plan was simple and brutal in its efficiency, with automated systems taking over maintenance work and artificial intelligence, managing logistics and robot crews handling the dangerous jobs that humans currently performed across coalition space. Zethra spoke with the confidence of someone who had never actually worked with the systems he was talking about and explained that the new automation would be more reliable and cost-effective than human workers who required food and rest and medical care and made mistakes that more advanced minds would never make. Within hours of the announcement, human workers across Coalition space began receiving termination notices that thanked them for their service and informed them that their positions would be eliminated over the next 6 months as the automated replacements came online. Park So-young was among the first to be replaced when a new AI system took control of the quantum reactor maintenance on Nexus Prime, and she watched with growing concern as the automated monitors failed to detect the small fluctuations that she had been correcting manually for years. The AI followed its programming perfectly and made adjustments according to the technical specifications, but it could not feel the subtle vibrations that warned of bearing wear or notice the color changes in the plasma flow that indicated filter problems or sense the dozens of other small signs that experienced human engineers used to prevent major failures. Engineer Kang Min-ho had been working in the Coalition Engineering Corps for 5 years and had built a network of human technicians across hundreds of stations and ships who shared information about problems and solutions that never made it into the official technical manuals. When the automated systems began replacing his people, he started keeping careful records of every failure. And every time the AI systems missed problems that human workers would have caught immediately, Dr. Yoon Ji-hai analyzed the replacement systems and discovered that they were designed by Keth Mori scientists who understood the theory behind the technology but had never actually worked with the equipment in real-world conditions where things broke down in unexpected ways. The AI systems could diagnose problems that matched their programming, but they had no ability to improvise solutions. When faced with unique situations that required creative thinking and practical experience, pilot Nam Dong-hyuk coordinated communications between human workers who were being systematically removed from their positions, and he began to notice patterns in the failures that were occurring as the automated systems took over. Ships were arriving late at their destinations because the AI pilots could not adapt to unexpected solar storms or navigate around asteroid fields that had shifted since the last survey. Space stations were experiencing power fluctuations because the automated systems could not compensate for the wear and tear that accumulated in older equipment. Supply shipments were being delayed or misdirected because the logistics AI could not account for the informal networks that human workers had developed to work around bureaucratic inefficiencies. The first major disaster happened 3 weeks after the efficiency directive began implementation, when a Nexari trade convoy carrying luxury goods to the Centauri colonies suffered a complete life support failure halfway through their journey. The automated emergency systems detected the problem and began following standard repair procedures, but they could not adapt when the damage turned out to be more complex than the programming anticipated. 3,000 Nexari merchants and their families died in the cold darkness of space, while the AI systems continued trying to implement solutions that did not work for the actual problem they were facing. Human technicians on a nearby Coalition patrol ship detected the convoy's distress signal and requested permission to assist, but were told that the situation was under control and that automated rescue systems were handling the emergency. By the time the human crew disobeyed orders and reached the convoy, most of the Nexari were already dead, and only a few hundred survivors were rescued from the ships that still had functioning life support. The official investigation blamed the disaster on faulty equipment and poor maintenance by human workers who had been responsible for the convoy's safety systems before the automated replacements took over. No mention was made of the fact that human engineers had repeatedly requested upgrades to those same safety systems, or that the automated systems had failed to implement basic emergency procedures that any experienced human technician would have known. So-young tried to present evidence that the life support failure could have been prevented if human technicians had been allowed to maintain the backup systems, but her report was dismissed as an attempt to undermine confidence in the new automated systems when she persisted in raising concerns about the safety of the automated replacements. She was accused of spreading alarmist propaganda and threatened with detention if she continued to interfere with coalition policy. Minho realized that the coalition leadership had made a decision that could not be changed by facts or evidence or even the deaths of thousands of innocent beings, because admitting that the efficiency directive was flawed would mean acknowledging that humans had been valuable all along. He began organizing a secret network of human workers who documented every system failure and every missed problem and every disaster that could have been prevented if experienced human personnel had been allowed to do their jobs. Dong Hyuk established encrypted communication, channels that allowed human workers to share information without coalition monitoring, and began coordinating efforts to help each other survive the systematic elimination of their positions. Ji Hai discovered that the AI systems were failing at a rate much higher than the coalition was reporting to the public, and that many of the failures were being covered up or blamed on sabotage by disgruntled human workers. The truth was that the automated systems worked perfectly in laboratory conditions, but could not handle the chaos and unpredictability of real-world operations where equipment aged and conditions changed and problems developed that no programmer had anticipated. Meanwhile, the coalition leadership celebrated each human worker who was replaced as proof that their civilization was advancing beyond the need for primitive biological labor. Zethra gave speeches about the bright future that awaited the coalition now that they were free from dependence on inferior human capabilities. Kethamori published research papers proving that artificial intelligence was superior to human intuition in every measurable way. The Nexari calculated the cost savings from eliminating human salaries and benefits and projected massive increases in profitability. None of them noticed that their great civilization was beginning to crack at the foundations as the human workers who had held everything together were systematically removed. Ships were breaking down more frequently, but the problems were attributed to normal wear and tear. Communication networks were becoming less reliable, but the issues were blamed on solar interference and equipment. Aging supply chains were becoming chaotic, but the disruptions were explained as temporary adjustment problems that would resolve themselves once the automated systems were fully integrated. Ambassador Miran watched the deterioration with growing alarm and tried to warn the Coalition Council that removing human workers would have consequences that extended far beyond simple cost savings. But her warnings were ignored by alien leaders who had already decided that humans were expendable and that their advanced civilization would be better off without the burden of supporting primitive Earth colonists. The breaking point came when Hyunwoo realized that the coalition was not just replacing human workers, but was actively working to force humanity out of galactic civilization entirely. The aliens had convinced themselves that humans were holding back progress and that the galaxy would be a better place without human involvement in coalition affairs. He knew that Ambassador Miran was preparing for the possibility that humanity would have to leave coalition space entirely. But he also knew that most humans still believed they could find a way to prove their worth and earn the respect they deserved. The evidence was mounting that the coalition could not function without human workers, but the alien leadership was too proud to admit their mistake and too committed to their vision of automated perfection to change course. Hyunwoo understood that the time for hoping and waiting and trying to prove human value was coming to an end, and that humanity would soon have to make a choice between accepting permanent second-class status or finding their own path among the stars. Ambassador Choi Mi-ran sat in her private office on Earth and stared at the classified reports that painted a clear picture of humanity's future in coalition space. And the future was nothing but continued humiliation and systematic elimination, until humans became extinct as a spacefaring species. The reports from Hyunwoo and Minho and dozens of other human workers across the galaxy all told the same story of automated systems failing and alien leadership refusing to admit their mistakes, and human workers being blamed for problems they had tried to prevent. She had spent 5 years trying to find a diplomatic solution that would give humanity a respected place in galactic civilization, but the Coalition Council had made it clear that they viewed humans as temporary guests who had overstayed their welcome. The time had come to implement Protocol Homeward, which was a classified contingency plan that Earth's government had developed in secret from the moment humans first made contact with alien civilizations. The plan was based on the assumption that humanity might someday need to withdraw from galactic society and return to isolated development, and it involved the complete evacuation of all human personnel from Coalition space along with the systematic removal of human knowledge and expertise from alien control Miran, activated secure communications with Admiral Song Woo-jin, who commanded a hidden fleet of human ships that had been constructed in the outer regions of Earth's solar system, where Coalition sensors could not detect them. Woo-jin had been preparing for this possibility for 3 years, and his fleet was ready to receive millions of human evacuees from across Coalition space and transport them to new colony worlds that Earth had been secretly establishing beyond the reach of alien governments. The Admiral confirmed that his ships were positioned at strategic locations throughout human space and could reach any Coalition system within. Days of receiving the evacuation order, Dr. Bae Yoon-ji received her orders to begin the most sophisticated data extraction operation in galactic history, which involved copying or destroying every piece of technical documentation that humans had helped create during their time in Coalition service. Yoon-ji's teams had been infiltrating Coalition computer networks for months and had identified the critical databases that contained maintenance procedures and repair protocols and system specifications that only human engineers truly understood. The plan was to ensure that when humans left Coalition space, they would take their knowledge with them and leave behind automated systems that looked functional, but would gradually degrade without human expertise to maintain them. Colonel Ryu Sang-wook coordinated the military aspects of the evacuation and worked with resistance cells that Min-ho had established on every major Coalition station and planet where humans were employed. Sang-wook's job was to ensure that the evacuation happened simultaneously across thousands of locations so that the Coalition could not prevent human departure by holding essential personnel as forced laborers. The operation required precise timing because if the aliens realized what was happening, they would try to stop the exodus by declaring humans to be Coalition property or claiming that human knowledge belonged to the galactic community. Meanwhile, human workers across Coalition space received coded instructions through channels that Dong-hyuk had established using maintenance communication networks that the aliens never monitored because they considered such work beneath their attention. The instructions were disguised as routine technical updates and equipment manuals, but they contained detailed plans for each human worker to prepare for immediate evacuation without alerting alien supervisors. So Young received orders to install subtle modifications in the quantum reactor systems that would cause them to drift out of optimal configuration once human monitoring was removed. The modifications were designed to look like normal wear and tear, but would accumulate over time until the reactors became unstable and required the kind of intuitive adjustment that only human engineers could provide. Jamin's teams began introducing small errors into the hyperspace communication networks that would not affect current operations, but would compound over time until the networks became unreliable without constant human supervision. The sabotage was so subtle that automated diagnostic systems would not detect it, and alien engineers would assume that any problems were caused by normal equipment. Degradation, human administrators began corrupting supply chain databases in ways that would not cause immediate shortages, but would make it impossible for automated systems to efficiently coordinate the movement of goods and materials across Coalition space. The corruption was hidden in backup files and secondary databases that aliens rarely examined, but which were essential for maintaining the complex logistics networks that kept Coalition civilization functioning. Meanwhile, human pilots secretly copied navigation data and hyperspace route information that they had discovered through years of experience traveling between Coalition worlds. The official star charts were accurate but incomplete, because they did not include information about solar storms and gravitational anomalies and other hazards that human pilots had learned to avoid through practical experience. Human technicians across the galaxy began preparing equipment failures that would not manifest until after the evacuation was complete. They installed delayed malfunctions in life support systems and programmed gradual degradation in computer networks, and created hidden vulnerabilities in defense systems that would only become apparent when human expertise was no longer available to prevent them. The work had to be done carefully because if the Coalition discovered the sabotage before the evacuation, they would arrest every human in Coalition space and probably declare war on Earth. Yunji's data extraction teams worked around the clock to copy technical specifications for Coalition technology that humanity could use to build their own advanced civilization. The information included manufacturing processes for faster-than-light drives and quantum computer designs and antimatter, containment systems that would allow humanity to develop technology equal to or better than what the Coalition possessed. At the same time, they corrupted the databases that contained information about human settlements and Earth's defensive capabilities. To ensure that the Coalition could not easily locate or attack human colonies, after the evacuation, Admiral Wu Jin positioned his evacuation fleet at the edge of Coalition space and confirmed that Earth's new colonies were ready to receive millions of refugees who would need housing and food and medical care. The colonies had been established on worlds that were rich in resources but difficult to reach through conventional hyperspace routes, which would make them almost impossible for Coalition forces to find or attack. Colonel Sang-wook received reports from resistance cells across Coalition space, confirming that human workers were ready for simultaneous evacuation and that the equipment sabotage was in place and ready to activate. Colonel also confirmed that Earth's defensive systems were prepared to repel any Coalition attempt to force human compliance or prevent the evacuation. Miran made the final decision after receiving confirmation that the Coalition Council had voted to declare humans a security risk and begin forcible relocation of human workers to internment facilities where they could be monitored more closely. The vote was the final proof that humanity had no future in Coalition space except as prisoners or slaves, and that the time for diplomatic solutions had passed. She activated Protocol Homeward and sent the coded signal that would begin the largest evacuation in galactic history. Within hours, human workers across thousands of Coalition installations would receive their final orders and begin the withdrawal that would leave alien civilization crippled and helpless. Miran knew that the Coalition leaders would eventually realize their mistake, but by then it would be too late to repair the damage or force humanity to return. The aliens had chosen to view humans as expendable, and now they would learn the true cost of their arrogance. The evacuation would begin at exactly 0300 Coalition Standard Time, and by dawn, humanity would be gone from Coalition space forever. Admiral Wu Jin confirmed that his fleet was ready, and Colonel Sang-wook reported that all resistance cells were in position, and Dr. Yunji verified that the data extraction was complete. The final phase of human involvement in Coalition civilization was about to begin, and when it ended, the aliens would be left to face the consequences of their decision to overlook humanity's worth. At exactly 0300 Coalition Standard Time, the Great Silence began as millions of human workers across thousands of worlds and stations received the evacuation signal and began to disappear from Coalition space like ghosts fading into the night. Technician Tae-young was working the night shift in the quantum reactor core of Nexus Prime when his communicator buzzed with the coded message that meant his 5 years of service to the Coalition was finally over. He looked around the massive reactor chamber where he had spent countless hours making the tiny adjustments that kept the power flowing smoothly to half the station, and felt a mixture of sadness and relief as he began the shutdown procedures that would leave the reactor in the hands of automated systems. Tae-young disabled the manual override controls that he had used to compensate for the quantum resonance fluctuations that occurred every few hours when the reactor's magnetic containment field interacted with cosmic radiation. Automated systems could detect the fluctuations, but they could not make the intuitive adjustments needed to prevent the gradual destabilization that would eventually cause a cascade failure. He also removed the backup monitoring equipment that he had installed to track the subtle changes in plasma temperature that warned of containment breaches hours before the main sensors would notice them. The reactor would continue operating normally for several days or maybe weeks before the accumulated instabilities reached critical levels, and by then, Tae-young would be far away from Coalition Space Supervisor Han Na-un, oversaw the evacuation of human workers from the agricultural processing centers on Kepler Colony, where massive automated systems converted raw crops into the processed foods that fed billions of beings across Coalition space. The processing centers were marvels of engineering that could handle enormous quantities of grain and vegetables and protein sources, but they required constant adjustment to account for variations in crop quality and seasonal changes that no computer program could fully anticipate. Nayeon's teams had been responsible for monitoring moisture levels and adjusting processing temperatures, and preventing contamination that could spoil entire shipments. But their knowledge came from years of experience rather than technical manuals. The automated replacement systems would follow their programming perfectly and produce acceptable results. For exactly 72 hours before the subtle variations in crop characteristics began to overwhelm their ability to adapt, Nayeon made sure that the processing centers were left in optimal condition, with all indicators showing green and all systems operating within normal parameters so that the coalition would have no immediate warning of the problems that were coming. Captain Shin Bo-ram commanded the rearguard evacuation fleet that would monitor coalition communications and provide cover for human workers who were still completing their withdrawal from the most sensitive installations. Bo-ram's ships were equipped with advanced stealth technology that Earth had developed in secret, and they could observe coalition activities without being detected by alien sensors. From her position at the edge of Coalition space, she watched the hyperspace beacons that guided ships between star systems begin to drift out of alignment as human technicians abandoned their monitoring stations. The beacons were designed to maintain their positions automatically, but they required constant micro-adjustments to compensate for gravitational influences and solar wind that could shift their orbits by fractions of degrees. Those tiny shifts would accumulate over time until the navigation network became unreliable and ships would begin arriving at wrong destinations or getting lost in hyperspace. Bo-ram also monitored the communication networks that Jaemin's teams had sabotaged and watched as the first error messages began appearing in coalition databases. The errors were small and seemingly random, but they would multiply exponentially as automated systems tried to correct problems that only human operators understood. How to fix on Vega Station, the life support systems began experiencing the fluctuations that human engineers had been preventing for years by manually adjusting air circulation patterns to account for the station's irregular rotation. The automated systems detected the fluctuations but interpreted them as sensor malfunctions rather than real problems and began running diagnostic routines that would waste precious time while oxygen levels slowly dropped in remote sections of the station. The coalition duty officers noticed the anomalies but assumed they were temporary glitches that the automated systems would resolve without human intervention. On Proxima Base, the power grid started showing instabilities as the quantum generators fell out of synchronization without human operators to monitor the phase relationships between multiple power sources. The automated systems tried to compensate by increasing output from some generators while reducing output from others, but they could not maintain the delicate balance that human engineers had achieved through years of experience. Similar problems were developing simultaneously across coalition space as thousands of human workers completed their evacuation and left behind systems that appeared to be functioning normally, but were actually beginning to fail in ways that would not become apparent for days or weeks. The coalition leadership initially did not notice the human absence because they had spent months talking about how unnecessary human workers were and how much better automated systems would perform. Some alien supervisors actually expressed relief that they no longer had to deal with human personnel and their constant requests for equipment upgrades and safety improvements. High Counselor Zethra issued a statement congratulating the coalition on successfully implementing the efficiency directive and achieving independence from primitive human labor. The Keth Mori scientists published papers proving that automated systems were already showing improved performance compared to human workers in several key metrics. The Nexari merchants calculated the immediate cost savings from eliminating human salaries and predicted massive increases in profitability. Now that operations were fully automated, but BORAM's monitoring stations detected the first signs of systematic failure as communication delays began appearing in coalition networks and power fluctuations started affecting industrial facilities. And navigation errors caused the first ships to miss their scheduled arrivals. The failures were still small and isolated enough that coalition authorities attributed them to normal equipment problems rather than recognizing them as symptoms of a much larger crisis. Meanwhile, human evacuation ships continued their silent withdrawal from coalition space, carrying not just millions of human workers but also the accumulated knowledge and experience that had kept alien civilization functioning. Smoothly, Admiral Wu Jin coordinated the massive logistics operation that transported families and equipment and essential supplies to the new human colonies that Earth had established in secret beyond coalition borders. The colonies were located on worlds that were rich in resources but difficult to reach through standard hyperspace routes, which would make them nearly impossible for coalition forces to find or attack. Each evacuation ship carried complete technical documentation for coalition technology, along with detailed plans for building advanced manufacturing facilities that would allow humanity to develop its own superior technology. The evacuees also brought with them the practical knowledge of how to actually make things work in the real world, rather than just understanding the theory behind advanced technology. Dr. Yunji's data extraction teams had successfully copied or corrupted every critical database in coalition space and left behind computer networks that would appear functional but would gradually become unreliable as hidden errors accumulated. The corruption was designed to manifest slowly enough that coalition technicians would not immediately realize that their problems were caused by sabotage rather than normal system degradation. Colonel Sang-wook confirmed that the evacuation was proceeding ahead of schedule and that human resistance cells had successfully completed their sabotage missions without detection. Earth's defensive systems were fully activated and ready to repel any coalition attempt to prevent the human exodus or demand the return of essential personnel. Ambassador Miran monitored the evacuation from her office on Earth and watched as humanity quietly vanished from galactic civilization. After 5 years of trying to find a place in the coalition community, she knew that the alien leaders would eventually realize what had happened, but by then, the damage would be irreversible and humanity would be safely established in their own space beyond coalition reach. The final evacuation ships departed coalition space just as the first major system failures began to cascade through alien infrastructure, and the coalition started to understand the true cost of their decision to overlook humanity's worth. BORAM's rearguard fleet completed their monitoring mission and prepared to withdraw to human space as the coalition began to realize that something was terribly wrong with their supposedly superior automated systems. The Great Exodus was complete and humanity was free to pursue their own destiny among the stars. 6 months after the human exodus, the coalition faced complete systemic collapse as the cascade failures reached critical mass and alien civilization began crumbling under the weight of its own arrogance. President Lim Seung-hwan sat in his office on Earth and read the intelligence reports that Chief Analyst Moon Jun-seo had compiled from monitoring coalition communications, and the reports painted a picture of devastation that exceeded even humanity's worst predictions. The quantum reactors. that powered coalition infrastructure were failing across the galaxy as the instabilities that human engineers had prevented for years finally overwhelmed the automated systems that could not adapt to the complex resonance patterns. Entire star systems had lost power when their primary reactors went critical, and the backup systems proved inadequate to handle the load without human technicians to optimize their performance. The hyperspace communication networks had fragmented into isolated sectors as navigation beacons drifted out of alignment and error correction protocols failed without human operators to interpret the subtle patterns that indicated system degradation. Colonies that had once been connected by instantaneous communication now waited days or weeks for messages from the coalition capital, and many worlds had lost contact entirely with the central government. Agricultural processing centers across coalition space were producing contaminated food that caused widespread illness and crop failures as the automated systems proved unable to adapt to seasonal variations and quality changes that human supervisors had handled instinctively. Medical facilities were shutting down as life support systems malfunctioned beyond the ability of automated repair systems to diagnose and fix the complex interactions between multiple subsystems that human technicians had understood through years of experience. General Quan Hai-jin reported that coalition military forces were severely degraded as weapons systems failed, and starships became stranded when their faster-than-light drives developed problems that only human engineers had known how to repair. The vaunted Vorthak fleet had been reduced to less than half strength, as ships broke down faster than their automated maintenance systems could repair them, and the remaining vessels were confined to patrol duties in their home systems. The Keth-Mori research facilities had lost most of their advanced equipment due to power fluctuations and cooling system failures that their brilliant scientists could understand theoretically but could not fix in practice. The Nexari trade empire was collapsing as transport ships disappeared in hyperspace and cargo facilities, experienced contamination problems, and quality control systems failed to prevent the shipment of defective goods. Junseo's analysts estimated that the coalition had lost approximately 40% of its infrastructure capability in just 6 months, and the rate of degradation was accelerating as more systems reached the point where automated maintenance could no longer compensate for accumulated wear and design. Flaws, refugee crises emerged as entire worlds became uninhabitable due to environmental system failures, and the coalition government proved unable to coordinate effective relief efforts without the human administrators who had managed such operations in the past. The proud alien civilizations that had considered themselves superior to humanity in every way were revealed to be surprisingly helpless when faced with practical engineering challenges that required more than theoretical knowledge to solve. Desperate coalition survivors sent increasingly frantic messages to Earth offering everything from full political equality to tribute payments if humanity would return and help restore their failing civilization. High Counselor Zethra himself appeared in a personal communication to President Seong-hwan and admitted with obvious humiliation that the coalition may have underestimated humanity's contributions to galactic society. The once proud Vorthak leader, who had dismissed humans as cognitively limited, begged Earth to send technical experts to help prevent the complete collapse of coalition infrastructure. President Seong-hwan convened the Human Commonwealth Council to consider the coalition's desperate pleas for assistance, and the debate was intense as some council members argued for humanitarian intervention, while others insisted that humanity owed nothing to the aliens who had tried to eliminate them. Admiral Wu Jin reported that humanity's new colonies were thriving beyond all expectations as human engineers applied their practical knowledge to building superior technology without alien interference. The colonies had already achieved self-sufficiency in food production and manufacturing, and were developing advanced weapons and defense systems that surpassed anything the coalition had possessed Dr. Park So-young, who was now Chief Science Officer of the Human Commonwealth, presented plans for technological development that could make humanity the dominant spacefaring civilization within a generation. Human researchers were making breakthroughs in quantum physics and hyperspace navigation and artificial intelligence that built upon coalition knowledge but improved it through practical application and innovative thinking. The Human Commonwealth had also established contact with several minor alien species that the coalition had ignored or oppressed, and these new allies were eager to join humanity in building a more equitable galactic community. Captain Lee Hyun-woo, who now commanded a Commonwealth exploration vessel, reported that human ships were discovering new worlds and resources beyond Coalition space and mapping hyperspace routes that would allow humanity to expand across previously unknown regions of the galaxy. The Commonwealth colonies were attracting refugees from Coalition space, including members of alien species who preferred human leadership to the chaos and incompetence that now characterized their former government. Earth's defensive systems had proven so effective that Coalition military forces could not even approach human space, and several attempted raids had been repelled with minimal effort. President Seung-hwan finally responded to the coalition's pleas with a simple and dignified message that stated humanity had found its path among the stars and wished the coalition well in finding theirs. The message was broadcast across coalition space and became known as the Declaration of Independence that formally ended humanity's involvement in alien politics. The final scene of the great drama occurred 10 years later when Hyun-woo stood on the bridge of his exploration ship and watched human construction crews building a new space station in a star system that humanity had claimed for its own. The station was larger and more advanced than anything the coalition had ever built, and it would serve as the capital of the Human Commonwealth, which now controlled territory twice the size of the old coalition. Reports from coalition space indicated that some alien governments had survived by adopting more democratic and egalitarian approaches to governance, but most of the old empire had collapsed entirely. The Vorthak had fragmented into warring factions that fought over the remaining functional equipment, while their once mighty civilization declined into barbarism. The Kethmori had retreated to their home world, where they pursued theoretical research that had no practical application, while their former colonies struggled to maintain basic technology. The Nexari had lost most of their trade networks and were reduced to local commerce between nearby worlds that could still maintain hyperspace communication. New alien civilizations were emerging from the ruins of the coalition, and many of them sought alliance with humanity, which had gained a reputation for fairness and competence in governing diverse populations. The Human Commonwealth offered genuine partnership to other species based on mutual respect and shared responsibility rather than the exploitation and discrimination that had characterized coalition-rule humanity. Had learned from their own experience of being undervalued and made sure that all members of the Commonwealth were treated as equals regardless of their species or technological capabilities. The ultimate lesson of the Great Exodus was that those who fail to recognize the worth of others often discover their own limitations too late, and the price of arrogance is paid in full when the overlooked finally depart. Hyun-woo smiled as he watched human and alien workers collaborating on the construction project and knew that humanity had found something better than acceptance in coalition space. They had found their own place among the stars where their practical wisdom and inclusive values could flourish without interference from those who could not see beyond their own prejudices. The Commonwealth flag flew proudly from the new station and represented not just human achievement, but the triumph of cooperation over arrogance and respect over exploitation. The galaxy was a better place because humanity had refused to accept second-class citizenship and had chosen to build their own civilization based on the values that made them truly superior to their former oppressors.